Hello, everyone, and welcome to our first official podcast of Season 2. The name of our podcast is The Lion, the Way, and the War, where we discuss Jesus, His church, and the spiritual battle that surrounds us all. My name is Craig Allison, and I'll be your host. Okay, so to all of our listeners out there, I want to just let you know how excited I am to be starting our second season. If you listen to Season 1 at all, you will know that our podcast came to life as a way of keeping our college students plugged in during the COVID shutdown. And that really was the only intent we had. Little did we know that the podcast would be well received and listened to. As a matter of fact, it received out of roughly 3 million different podcasts, it was in the top 10% globally. So that's a real exciting statistic for me because it tells me that there's people that are eager to hear the kind of stuff that we're talking about, that it's relevant. And so that's Season 2. We're going to jump right into it. Also, we've got a few things to share with you, big changes for Season 2. The first one is this right here. We're now on video as well as audio, so that's going to be a new thing for us, and I believe we're going to have a YouTube station, so excited about that. One of the other things is we've actually got a studio here. Before, we were just kind of winging it wherever, and the quality wasn't so good. So that's exciting. The church has set us up with a studio. By the way, also, every episode is going to be sponsored. This particular episode is sponsored by Central Church of Christ, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. Finally, I'm excited. Since Season 1, I got a book published, which is also called The Lion, the Way, and the War. And this is based on 10 years of me being a campus minister and talking to college students and leaders in the church. And the things that I found out are, I think, really relevant to what we're talking about here today and throughout the rest of the season, which is why is it our college students are leaving their faith when they get to college. So especially if you're a parent or a church leader, I would highly recommend that you pick this book up, read it, and see some of the things that I've seen, hear some of the things that the college students are sharing with me, why they are walking away from their faith or why they're staying plugged in. Okay, so all of that aside, now let's get to business. I want to introduce our first guest for Season 2. Tynan Breeds. Tynan is on his second year as a student ambassador at the Christian Student Center, and he comes to us by way of Worcester, Massachusetts. We've had this debate. He says it's Worcester. It's pronounced Worcester.
It's Worcester,
Massachusetts. So
yeah.
You did correct me because I kept saying Massachusetts. So we got the Massachusetts, which is about an hour west of Boston.
Yep.
Ty, I really appreciate you coming in today to talk to us and to spend some time sharing some of your story with us. So, and I mentioned the fact that you've been a student leader for 2 years because that's especially astounding to me, given some of your backstory and the spiritual dimension of it. You came to Chattanooga, just different things lining up that brought you here, I think providentially, and you really, correct me if I'm wrong, but you really didn't have like a spiritual mindset about, getting plugged into the student center or anything like that. So I'm just going to I'm going to turn it over to you now and just kind of share your journey about, how you got here and how all of that led you to being at the student center.
Yeah. So it all started when I was touring for colleges, and I'm from Massachusetts, and I didn't have no spiritual background whatsoever, didn't intend on going to anything related to, very much so not a Christian ministry. I was touring a few technical colleges in the South, and I got a phone call telling me to go check out Chat State and do their NDT program. I ended up coming to Chattanooga and touring. I really liked it, and I ended up finding a roommate, which happened to be in the apartment building directly next to the Christian Student Center. From there, I went to classes for a week or so without interacting, but my roommate knew about the CSC and eventually invited me to one of their events. So I went and played soccer with them and just kind of fell in love with the community, fell in love with the fellowship. And from there ended up sticking around, eventually learning about God and down the road devoting myself to him.
So you talked to me before about, there were some roadblocks, some things that just kind of seemed to dissolve away that enabled you to get to where you were. So to talk a little bit, share, if you don't mind, share some of those things that happened.
So first of all was just moving away. The money was a difficult thing because I'm out of state. So obviously there's a lot more, and not going to some of those technical colleges, I was giving up some scholarships that I was offered. But from what I saw, I, was quickly given grants from Tennessee to go to school. So that took care of my first year. And then I was able to get in-state rates for school, which just completely eased the pain of the money. And
which is not normal.
No, which I'm very grateful for.
Yeah.
So that was just one of the roadblocks. Another one was Chat State does not have dorms. So I was needed to find a roommate. And this was very late in the year for finding someone to live with for this year. But I ended up finding my roommate, and we, I just met him very quickly, and very quickly it worked out. And like I said, the apartment building I moved into was directly next to the CSC. So that proximity was crazy.
Yeah, and out of all the roommates that you could have possibly found in a city that has, a little over 250,000 people, it just so happened that you found a guy that literally, like you said, was right next door to our facility.
And knew people from back home that went there.
Right, exactly. And then you had issues, with the whole licensing thing, and all of that seemed to, getting your driver's license, all of that switched over, and all of that, fell into place for you too. Right?
It all worked out very quickly.
Yeah.
So,
and that's kind of the interesting element to me is any one of those things, and any under normal circumstances, take lots and lots and lots of time, because you're dealing with, in some of the regards, university systems. I can tell you, not a slam against Chattanooga State, but it's kind of tough to get paperwork and stuff. It has a tendency to get lost, and so there's that aspect of it. And then you're dealing with governmental rate. Any government bureaucracy is going to take a long time. You literally, it just all boom, boom, boom fell into place so quickly.
It almost took care of itself very quickly. And that's amazing to me, because it really shows that this is somewhere I was kind of meant to end up.
Yeah. And still, the spiritual dimension had not entered your frame of reference at this point. It just, everything's lining up. Everything's working out for you to be in Chattanooga at Chat State in a program that you liked. And then you got in there, and I think you really connected with at least one of the professors there that was spiritual in nature, which is also kind of an unusual thing in state universities. You don't have a whole lot of professors that profess to be of faith, of Christianity. So that was a neat thing for you also, right?
Right, definitely.
Yeah. Okay. So I've got some questions I'd like to ask you, and we're just going to go through some things and talk about and have some discussion. I may have some follow-up questions for you. So the first question I wanted to talk to you about is, how did you personally find out about the Christian Student Center?
So as I mentioned, my roommate that I moved into, he was, a pretty devout Christian, or is, and I had been curious about it, but not enough to ask or kind of get into it myself. So eventually, when he invited me to a student center for a party that they were having, this has been a week of me being here. I hadn't made a lot of friends. I was getting pretty homesick. So I agreed, and I eventually found out because of his invitation to go. And it's funny because he was going home, so I was going to go by myself. Mm-hmm. So that took quite a bit of myself to go. But the initial finding out about the CSC was from him.
Do we want to give a shout out to that person?
Will Guy.
What a guy.
What a guy. Yeah. So I found
Will,
him
if you're
very
listening
late.
to this, you see how things proceed, just a simple invitation. So what kept you coming back to the Student Center?
So my first night of being here is really my first night interacting with people from the South, I guess you could say, because went to Chat State, but I didn't really interact with many people there. And especially so at the Student Center, the hospitality that I received, just welcoming faces, people.
Nobody made fun of your accent either, right?
Well, I wouldn't say that, but maybe not at first. Maybe after they knew me. But just to be welcomed into a community so easily, people taking interest in you, taking interest of why you're there, who you are, and caring. And so the first few times that I came around, I went back the next day for Saturday and hung out with them all day. Got to know really good people that I still know now, made some relationships that matter, and really just was welcomed into a community.
You're junior now or sophomore?
Junior or sophomore. I have
You've
to
been here.
it out,
This is your third year.
This is my third year here.
But you goofed around and don't have enough hours to be a junior.
No, I might get another degree. That's all.
I'm just messing with you. Okay, so you're in the college scene. You're in it every day. So how hard is it to be a college student today at a secular university and still maintain a strong Christian outlook in life?
So I think it really depends on how you set yourself up, because I think in this situation, you really can set yourself up for success or failure. The first thing that anyone should do is find a community to be involved with. And we'll get into that. But I think it can be very difficult if you don't put yourself in that situation to succeed. If you don't put yourself into a group or a church family or anything like that, you can get overwhelmed with just the world around you, the lack of the spiritual growth, the lack of fellowship, and then most of all, the temptations that college brings. And just being a student in this world. It brings with it a lot of opportunities to fail and a lot of opportunities to fall away.
And certainly at a state university, we're competing against a lot of those opportunities that students have to choose other pathways. So this is something I keep hearing over and over again. It's something I mentioned in my book is it matters who you hang out with. It matters who you surround yourself with. It matters about community. So it's good to hear that from a college student and actually, you're cognizant, you're aware of that fact, and you choose to be in that type of community. Okay, so how important is, kind of speaking of that, how important is church family during the college years?
So for me, personally speaking, the church family is just foundational to your faith and foundational to keeping it. I know that it would be very difficult for me if I didn't have the church family that I have here. And it was just foundational for me growing my faith and finding it in the first place. But for someone who is going to college, especially if they're going far away, not where they can't be in their home church, putting yourself in a situation, putting yourself in a church family is absolutely necessary. For so many reasons, but most of all, just to have that community and people there to fall back on, people there to talk to, people there to be there for you. Because college is challenging. And I think maybe they don't, underestimate it, but it's so important to have people behind you, especially spiritually.
I hear a lot of college students say, I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious. And it's kind of a way of them saying, I don't really need to be involved in a church community. I don't have to go to church. I don't have to get up on Sundays. I don't have to go to Bible classes. I don't have to participate in that stuff because I know that I'm a spiritual person. I know I love Jesus and all of that. You seem to be saying that that's really not a great outlook.
No, because, as we're talking about this, it just makes me think about the challenges I faced and then all the response that I've had, all the good responses that I've had from the community and from the church family that I find myself in. I know I can go to anyone with all my problems, and I know that someone will be able to help me very effectively.
There's a level of intentionality there that is required on your behalf, right?
Right.
So what is it that makes some college students, they're just not going to, they don't want to do it. They don't want to make that intentional effort to connect to a group of Christians. They'd rather just sort of stay on the fringes.
Yeah, I mean, there can be a lot of reasons why. I think that part of it can be they're scared, or maybe they're not receiving an invitation. I know for me, getting that invitation that I had to go be with those people and them inviting me back, that was important for me because I wouldn't just go somewhere if I wasn't invited.
Okay.
But I think that when people go to college, it can be scary, especially because they don't have people around them. Like me, my family was hundreds of miles away. So I was by myself, literally and mentally. So to get that community, to get that, to get involved, it took someone asking me to be there.
But you're by nature, you're kind of extroverted
Right.
anyway. So
that helps definitely.
Yep. So for the introvert, I think there's a lesson that you're kind of walking around the edges on, a lesson for us in the church, a lesson for church leaders, a lesson for parents to share with their kids, which is that invitation part is crucially important, especially for the kids who are introverted. You can't invite a person enough. Right. I mean, you have to show them that you are genuinely interested in having them part of your community. And if they don't get that, especially the introverts, then they're probably not going to get plugged in.
Right, and it might not work the first time or the second time or the third time, but you can't stop trying.
Yeah, absolutely. Great advice. Okay, so what do you think is the most dangerous thing about being in college for your soul, your eternity?
For me, the answer would probably just be that we are so much more free as soon as we get to college, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It can be a very good thing. Mm-hmm. It can lead us to great spiritual growth, but it can also lead to ruin. If we choose, like I said, with the intentionality part, if we just choose to not get plugged in, we choose to not go to church, it's so easy to not wake up on Sunday. It's so easy to not go to fellowship. It's so easy to not be part of that. If we make those decisions to not do it because we're lazy, we don't want to, we're scared, we're nervous, we're tired, college is a lot, but you need to be there for your spiritual part. And again, it's that or it's the temptation gets to you. Yeah. There is so much that we're faced with every day through so many different ways. I mean, we're getting bombarded left, right, and center. And that is difficult for a lot of people. And I'm sure so many people fall to that.
Yeah.
But like we were talking about, the intentionality part is the hardest for me, I think.
Do you think it's harder today for college students as far as the temptation piece than it was, say, for me, back in the late 80s, early 90s?
Most definitely. I think that the culture as a whole has really changed, especially. It's much different for me coming from New England, coming down here, because just the culture difference. Right. But in general, I mean, with the introduction of, social media, just the overall, perversion of society, it's completely changed the way that a college student's life is lived. Yeah. And I feel like it's a lot easier to face temptation. It's a lot easier to see it every day. Yeah. And therefore it's a lot more difficult to resist it.
Yeah. Access to stuff is definitely, it's just pervasive, I think. Getting pulled into things that you shouldn't get pulled into. It's just, and the way, so it used to be like if you did get pulled into that back when, so let's say 30 years ago, there was still it seemed like this strong disapproval by society, but now you don't even have that as like a barrier. It's like, society's so completely fine with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So scary stuff there. All right. So why do you think that so many college students who were faithful before college walk away from their faith while they're in college? You're kind of coming at this from the reverse. You
right.
didn't really have
any faith.
That type of faith background, but you got it while you were in college because of the student center. But reverse of that. Why do you think that is? And this may not be a fair question to ask you, but I'm asking it to you anyway.
Well, I have a few things to say on that. One that I see very often, working as a leadership member of a campus ministry, is that a lot of kids come to college and realize that they don't have their own faith. Realize that a lot of times it was their parents waking them up on Sunday, bringing them to church, bringing them to these youth group events, but they didn't really know.
Yeah.
And maybe an encouragement to anyone listening to this, you should be involved in your kid's spiritual life. You should want your kid to have their own faith. They can't be on your faith. So I feel like a lot of kids come to college, maybe they wake up for the first Sunday, and then the second Sunday comes around and their parents aren't there to wake them up. they sleep in.
Yeah.
Maybe they were initially in a campus ministry, but they realize that their parents aren't there to make them do anything. And they realize that they don't have their own faith. And some of them will take that as an encouragement and get plugged in, get involved.
Mm-hmm.
But I think many more will continue to sleep in, will continue to not get involved, and will continue to let their whatever faith they have die. So I think, as depressing as that sounds, it's almost an encouragement to parents, to churches, to get involved in your kid's life, get involved in your kid's spiritual life. Do Bible studies with them, do devotionals, pray. Because the thing that I think I've seen most often, and I'm sure you can say is the same, is kids don't have their own faith.
Everything you just said is so powerful, and I hope if you're a parent listening to this and watching this, I hope that if you're a church leader listening to this, and there's no agenda here. I mean, this is a person coming from that outside perspective that has caught on to something that I think a lot of us as people who have been raised in the church, as parents especially, as leaders in the church especially, we've somehow discounted that. We've lost it. We've taken the attention off of that, and I think that's a huge contributing factor to this epidemic of kids walking away from their faith. So, really, thank you for verbalizing what I think needs to be heard more. Okay, so how do you handle, as talking back into the college stuff now, how do you handle at a state university, say, professors who look down on Christianity or maybe coming from a non-believing or atheistic background? I don't know if you've had any of that or been exposed to it or not. I know personally for myself, coming from I went to a Christian university, so that wasn't even you would never have that. But at a state university, I know some students are exposed to kind of the ridicule piece of that from these PhD level smart guys or smart women.
Right, and I feel like that can be heavily discouraging. I would say I'm used to it because my whole life I didn't have any professors that were Christian or anything like that. Growing up in public high school and Mass, so I feel like I'm more equipped to handle that. But I think for someone that grew up maybe in a Christian high school, Christian middle school their whole life, or homeschooled or whatever it may be, it can be a challenge, and it can be it can shake them. And I feel like it's something that you have to come at from an angle of, you're a college student, you want to do good in classes, but you need to understand that there are people in different walks. There are people in different parts of their life, and especially in different parts of their faith. And so for me, the thing that encouraged me to check out Christianity, to take a closer look, was the love that I saw, the genuineness. So I feel like at every opportunity, you should love, you should be genuine. That's not to say that, you need to sacrifice your class time for everything, like to be talking to a professor, trying to get them to understand, because that's a challenge. Yeah. Definitely be in the class and do good. Try to be good in their class and be an example. But don't get discouraged because there's a professor looking down at you for your faith. Don't be discouraged because they ridicule Christianity in a lecture or something like that. Not that I've ever seen that, and hopefully no one ever will, but I can definitely see that it's a discouraging thing that people face. But I would say just be strong and understand the love that both you have and that you must give to others.
Okay. Was there a moment in when you got to Chattanooga and you started thinking about God and just eternity and this whole Christian stuff, was there a moment that really sealed it for you, that you knew that this was a moment where you needed to be really serious about your faith?
I wouldn't say there was so much of a moment, more like a series of events. I think that, coming to the Student Center for the first few weeks and kind of being interested but not really part of it, it definitely showed me a lot. But that love, like I was talking about, really just, I couldn't shake it. I couldn't shake the feeling of being welcome. And as I started to talk to you more, started to talk to others about Christianity, what it was, who was Jesus, who are these people that they're talking about, what is this book that we're reading, it started to intrigue me more and more. And then I started learning about just how evident it is in our lives, how much there's a creator, and just talking to you more about myself and my journey and all the things that I thought of as just conveniences, things that worked out, just happened that way. I started to realize that, maybe I was there for more.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we kind of came to realize in your office one day when we were talking, that it kind of hit me that, maybe there's more to me being here than just to get a degree at college. Maybe there's some like world shattering realization I'm going to come to. And that culminated when I started studying more, getting plugged in more, talking more, always learning more. And it came to the point where, I started to realize this is something I believe in and this is part of me and I want this to be part of me. And then spoke to you and I was baptized. Mm-hmm. So I think that series of events just led me from being interested to now being on fire.
I appreciate that answer, Ty. You mentioned there, you alluded to this just series of events, these beyond coincidence, like just too much stuff, this providential stuff that continued to happen, and after a while, it defies the odds. It's like, okay, statistically, this now becomes kind of an impossible thing, and I have a little story. You brought your bottle of New England maple syrup. And I can't interview and not share this story, because it's such a funny thing about how God works in our lives, right? So last year I took a group of college students to Ecuador, and it's called Camp Bellevue, and so they do mission work there, and they work in this community up in the Andes Mountains, and on our second to last day, we had this breakfast, and Rusty Campbell, he's the missionary there with his wife Flora, and by the way, they do a great work. Rusty, maybe you'll watch this episode here, plugging Camp Bellevue for you. Anyway, so last breakfast we were having pancakes, and Rusty and I are having this discussion, remember, about pancakes, and he's asking me, what kind of syrup I put on it, and I'm like, whatever, like Aunt Jemima or whatever and he's like, so you've never had like a New England maple syrup? And I was like, no, I don't think I have. You've never had? Are you kidding me? You've never tried a good New England maple syrup? Like, what? You haven't lived life. So he's like kind of getting frustrated and very disappointed that I haven't had New England maple syrup. And so I said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll when I get back to the States, I'll try to locate some. He's like, no, not try. This is something that you have to do. Like, your life is not complete until you've had New England maple syrup. And it's like my second day back, and you're moving in. You're starting your first year as a student ambassador, right? I have the timing right on that, I think. And so I'm in my office, and you come down to the office, and you're like, hey, man, would you like to see my room? And I said no, because I didn't feel like walking upstairs. And then you're like, I got something for you. And you remember that, right?
Yeah.
So I followed you upstairs, and I don't know if... So I didn't get a bottle this big, but this is the bottle, a smaller version of this. This is New England maple syrup.
Right. From Massachusetts.
Yep. Massachusetts. So I was just kind of like speechless. I was just stunned, and then I started laughing, and you're like, what are you laughing at? And I
thought you were laughing at me.
Well, I thought somehow you had, because I knew that you didn't know Rusty, but like I figured there's no way that you didn't have this conversation with him, because this is exactly what we were talking about. So, just stuff like that has surrounded you, and just this providential work, even the small little details, I think, of God wanting to be part of our lives. And he does this kind of stuff to show us that, he's paying attention to everything. And that's certainly been evident, I think, in your work with the Student Center and your spiritual journey since you've been there, from no background at all to now being a student leader, bringing other people to Christ. That's an amazing thing. So, okay, so Ty, I'm going to let you off the hook now, but I am going to throw you a curveball, because we do, for those that don't know, we do kind of like a pre-show, so that the people I interview have a basic idea of the kind of things I'm going to ask. So this is kind of a curveball for you. So you have no idea what I'm going to ask you. No, it's nothing really big. If you could go back and change anything about your time in Chattanooga, about the students that are about in it, what thing, if any, would you want to change?
I feel like everything happened the way it was meant to. But if I could go back and tell myself something, like day one was go to Welcome Week for CSC. I think that my day one would be just jump in, be part of the ministry. Yeah. For me, having no faith, I think that was a little bit of a leap for me.
Right.
But for anyone out there that's going to a college that has a ministry, like a public college, the number one advice for myself when I first got there and for anyone else is jump in, be part of it, make yourself part of the ministry, be involved, go to Bible studies, be part of the fellowship, make friends, make relationships, be there. So if I could change one thing, it would just be being plugged into the CSC from day one.
Great advice. All right, so we need your feedback. I'm always looking for suggestions on how to improve our episodes, to bring relevant issues in front, topics that could be encouraging or helpful or maybe even challenging. So let us know. And there's multiple ways you can do that. We've got, we're on social media, so leave comments. Share this if you'd like it, if you feel like it would be helpful for somebody else to see this and to hear what Ty has shared with us. So like I mentioned, this episode is sponsored by Central Church of Christ. They are an integral part of this. As a matter of fact, none of this would even be possible if it were not for Central Church of Christ in Chattanooga, Tennessee, established like in 1909. We'd love to have you come and visit us and worship with us. Worship is at 400 Vine Street in Chattanooga, 1030, and feel free to check out our website there. All right, final thoughts, Ty, are going to go to you. I'd like for you to read your passage of Scripture, whatever that might be. We always try to end. Where are you going?
I had to get my phone.
I thought you were leaving. I'm like, oh no, he's cutting out on me. Yeah, go ahead and read a passage of Scripture as we close out.
In going along with the need for community, need for fellowship, need for involvement in a church body, the verse I like to read is Ecclesiastes 4:9-12. 2 are better than one, because they have a good reward for their toil. For if they fall, one will lift up his fellow man. But woe to him who is alone when he falls and has not another to lift him up. Again, if 2 lie together, they keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone? And though a man may prevail against one who is alone, 2 will withstand him. A threefold cord is not easily broken.
Until our next podcast of The Lion, the Way, and the War, love one another, be kind to one another, and remember that the Creator of the universe loves you so much that He gave up His only Son for you. Have a blessed day.